Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here. And in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Week 14 Monday Night Football Showdown slate on Draftkings. We do have a really good game this Monday night between the Rams and the Cardinals. As always, guys, we're going to talk through this Showdown slate. We're going to break everything down. We're going to go, from top to bottom, talk through the player pool, hit on all the guys that I do have interest in for this slate. Then towards the end of the video, we will kind of talk through roster construction, how I'm looking to build out my lineups, who I like to play a captain. We'll break that down towards the end of the video. But before we do get started, please, guys, do hit the like button. I appreciate all the likes as always. If you're new to the channel here, make sure you click that subscribe button as well. And if you have not yet, go over to PrizePicks. Check out the sponsor of this video, PrizePicks. Go sign up for PrizePicks and use code NOAH when you do sign up, and they will match your first deposit, give you a free bet up to $100. You can take a look at what PrizePicks has to offer. As you can see, they already do have a lot of fantasy point projections posted for Mondays, for this Monday night game. You basically just take the over or the under on the players' projections. They have fantasy point projections. They also have, player props, so passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, receptions, touchdowns. You can basically bet on everything on PrizePicks. You can bet on just about every sport. They have every sport imaginable. You can mix and match sports as well. So if you guys want to check out PrizePicks, if you do sign up, make sure you use code NOAH and they will match your first deposit. PrizePicks will give you a free bet up to $100 when you do sign up with my code, and you can make some picks for tonight's game, win up to 10 extra money over on PrizePicks. But let's go ahead and take a look at this Showdown slate. Start off at the top. So Cooper Kupp, most expensive option on this slate. As expected, Cooper Kupp has been absolutely amazing this year. He's been like the wide receiver one in fantasy. He's just been so good, getting a ton of volume every single week, double-digit targets in literally every single game except one this year. Hard not to like Cooper Kupp here. The Cardinals have had a really good defense this season, but Cooper Kupp is just so involved in this Rams offense that basically any slate he's on, he is going to be a really good option, and especially on a Showdown slate, Cooper Kupp's going to project as a top play. Now, I will say that I think I do prefer the quarterbacks over Cooper Kupp, especially Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray I do like quite a bit here. Big time game. I expect Kyler Murray to play well. First game back from his ankle injury last week against Chicago. He didn't really throw the ball much, but he was able to get it done through the ground, and we know Kyler Murray can do that. He has a lot of rushing upside. Only had 123 passing yards last week, but did have 2 passing touchdowns, also had 2 rushing touchdowns. Ran really good with the touchdowns. You don't expect him to get that, 4 touchdowns on only, or Kyler Murray throwing 123 yards and having 4 total touchdowns is pretty unlikely to happen, again, but with how much he, is able to do it through the ground, with how much upside he has in general, it was obviously a super talented quarterback. Big time game, high total. Right now, this game has like a 51.5 total. So, Vegas expecting a lot of points scored here. We've seen Kyler Murray, in these high total games, in these games that have shootout potential, like he can go out there and put up just massive games, go for 35, 40 DK points. I think Kyler Murray is probably one of my favorite pay-up options in general. I slightly prefer him over Cooper Kupp, but I think Cooper Kupp's a really strong play as well. Matthew Stafford at 10-4, no problem with Matthew Stafford either. He had a stretch of games where the Rams in general, just as a team, they really weren't playing that well. Matthew Stafford was really struggling, but the last few weeks, he's looked a lot better. Obviously, they beat down on Jacksonville last week. Stafford had 24 DK points the week before against Green Bay in a close game, 26 DK points. This should be another pretty high scoring and close game, so I think we will see another, probably 20-plus DK point game from Matthew Stafford. I think, quarterbacks on Showdown slates are always going to provide you with safe floors. Quarterbacks are always staples in cash games. If you play cash on Showdown, I think you normally want to play both quarterbacks. On this slate, I think both quarterbacks look pretty solid. I would prefer Kyler between the two, but Matthew Stafford definitely in play in what should be a pretty high-scoring game. Then you got James Conner, 9,800. So we're going to have to watch the status of Chase Edmonds. So Chase Edmonds is eligible to return from injury reserve for this game, and he is currently a game-time decision. So Chase Edmonds could be back this week for this game, which would definitely impact Conner's role, enough to where I don't think he'd be a standout play at 9,800. Now, obviously, these last few weeks without Chase Edmonds, Conner has been a true workhorse running back. Pretty sure last week he played like over 90% of the snaps. Conner played 91% of the snaps last week. The 2 weeks before that with Edmonds out, he played 82% of the snaps. If Edmonds is out again, I think we will see James Conner be a workhorse back, play 85, 90% of the snaps, probably get close to 20 touches. I mean, they've been using him a ton through the air and on the ground. He's been getting 20 carries. He's been getting some usage in the passing game as well. If Edmonds is out, I think James Conner is a really strong pay-up option if Chase Edmonds is out. Now, if Chase Edmonds does return for this game, then I'd be a little bit hesitant on James Conner just because I think he would lose some work to Chase Edmonds. I don't know if Edmonds would, technically come back and just it would be like a 50-50 split or anything. I still think Connor would have the upper hand in terms of touches, but I think Edmonds would take enough away from Connor that I probably wouldn't want to pay $9,800 for Connor. So that's just kind of a wait and see. That is definitely an important injury we're going to have to watch with, Chase Edmonds being a game time decision. But then you got D-Hop at $9,600. So D-Hop also made his return last week. He only saw 2 targets, only had 2 catches for 32 yards. He did not play much last week. He was definitely on a limit. I'm pretty sure, like, snaps-wise, he plays 74% of the snaps, which is usually not what we see from Hopkins. He's normally like an every down wide receiver. He normally plays 85, 90% of the snaps. He was limited a little bit last week. Kyler Murray did not throw the ball much last week. He only threw the ball 15 times, only had like 120 passing yards. Hopkins was still able to get into the end zone last week. I don't know if I want to look too much into that game, though, just because, given how game script set up, they didn't really have to throw the ball that much. They were able to control the clock, run the ball a lot. Their defense, was able to force turnovers. I think in this game, in a game that expects to be high scoring, we expect a lot of points to be scored. We should, probably see D-Hop get back to his normal workload, be an every down wide receiver. The matchup against this Rams secondary is not great for Hopkins, but he still should be a, number 1 wide receiver, should still get a good amount of targets. He's not the elite target monster that he used to be like last season, just because with A.J. Green in the mix, with Zach Ertz in the mix, with Rondale Moore in the mix, like they kind of spread the ball around in this Arizona offense. But I would still expect 6, 7, 8 targets for Hopkins minimum. At $9,600, he's a fine pay-up option. I think he'll be a little bit contrarian on this slate. Obviously, he's going to get ownership, but I don't think he gets as much ownership as the quarterbacks. If Edmonds is out, he will definitely not get as much ownership as Connor. So Hopkins could be kind of a leverage play, a pay-up option that doesn't get nearly as much ownership as some of these other guys. But, to say that I would prefer him over Murray or Stafford or Kupp, that just wouldn't be the case. I would definitely rather just play those guys if I'm just, paying up for somebody. Then you got Van Jefferson at $8K. Van Jefferson continues to have a pretty solidified role with Robert Woods out. Robert Woods out of the mix now, out for the season. Van Jefferson's basically been like the wide receiver too. In terms of playing time, he's been an every down wide receiver. Basically, the 3 wide receivers that are going to play all the snaps for the Rams are Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Odell Beckham. Last week, Van Jefferson played 78% of the snaps. The week before that, he played 98% of the snaps. He's played 90+% of the snaps in 3 of their last 4 games. I think we're going to see Van Jefferson be an every down wide receiver here at 8K. If he's going to get 7, 8, 9 targets, I think he's a pretty good play at 8K. I don't think he gets a ton of ownership either, especially because you do have Sony Michel priced close to him, and Sony Michel, does stand out as a very strong option on the slate. But I definitely do like Van Jefferson. I think his upside is for sure there. He's in a really good offense. He's got a good quarterback. The targets should be there, especially with Robert Woods out. So I do like Van Jefferson at 8K. Sony Michel at $7,200 is by far like the best point per dollar play on the slate. He's probably going to be one of the most popular plays, but it's hard to not like him with Darrell Henderson out again. Darrell Henderson was active last week, but I don't think he played a single snap. So Darrell Henderson was active last week, but did not play at all. Sony Michel literally almost played every single snap last week. He played 97% of the snaps last week, saw 27 touches, 24 carries for 121 yards, also had 4 targets, 3 catches. Look, the matchup against Jacksonville last week was fantastic for Michel. Obviously, this matchup against Arizona is not nearly as good, but Sony Michel is going to be an every down running back, and he's $7,200. So, with Darrell Henderson out, I think Sony Michel at this price point is probably too cheap. I mean, he's going to get 12, 15 carries. He's probably going to get 4, 5, 6 targets. Even if game script gets a little sideways and Arizona, gets a big lead and the Rams are playing from behind, I still expect Sony Michel to be out there running routes, catching passes, even if they're playing from behind. And if they're playing with the lead, they'll just feed the ball to Sony Michel. We saw them do that last week. So I think Sony Michel at $7,200 is a really strong play. I think he's a pretty good captain play. I think his captain ownership will be pretty high. So in large field tournaments, you could definitely just not play him at captain. But he's going to be a guy that's really hard to avoid. He's going to project really well for his salary, I'd assume. He's going to be a workhorse running back without Darrell Henderson. They don't really have anyone behind Sony Michel that they're going to give work to. I don't even know who the other running backs are for the Rams, and that might be something I should know. But Sargent, I think he got some touches. He got 2 touches last week. I mean, that's the thing. They don't have anyone else behind Michel that you expect to take work away from him. So he's going to play 90+% of the snaps, probably get 20 touches. At $7,200, he's a volume play that really stands out as definitely being too cheap. Then you got Odell Beckham at $6,200. Odell Beckham has not been that bad lately. We've kind of seen him do decent these last few weeks. Now, he has scored a touchdown in back-to-back games, but he's been getting decent volume. 5 targets last week against Jacksonville, 10 targets the week before that against Green Bay. Like I said earlier, Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, like those are going to be the three receivers that you expect to play, basically all the snaps. You expect to get most of the targets. Obviously, Tyler Higbee will get some targets. Sony Michel gets some targets out of the backfield, but I think it's likely we see 6, 7, 8 targets for Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham, is he still an elite wide receiver? Probably not, but I still think he is talented, and I still think he's a guy that does offer upside. He still offers big playability. He had a long touchdown catch against Green Bay back in Week 12. I kind of like Odell Beckham here as a sneaky tournament option. I don't think he gets a ton of ownership, especially with Sony Michel being priced close to him. Like, Sony Michel is just going to project so much better that I'll expect a lot of people play Michel. I think Michel's a great play, but I definitely like Odell in tournaments. I think Odell makes some sense at the captain spot. I don't think Odell gets like any ownership in the captain spot, and he's still got upside. He could still go for 100 yards and a touchdown any week, I think, especially in this really good Rams offense. They kind of spread the ball around. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's going to get a lot of targets, but you do expect Van Jefferson to get 7, 8 targets. You expect Odell to get probably 5, 6, 7 targets minimum. I think at 6,200, he's a for sure guy that I would look to in tournaments. Cash games, don't know if I'd go there, but GPPs, I think he makes a lot of sense as a tournament play. Then getting below 6K, talking about some of these cheaper receivers we can look to for value. So Christian Kirk at 5,600. Now that D-Hop is back, now that AJ Green's off the COVID list, it's really hard to tell who's going to have the big game between all these Cardinals receivers. They do spread the ball around. They have Zach Ertz in the mix now, who's going to get some opportunity. I still think Christian Kirk's viable. I don't have a problem with any of these Cardinals receivers, whether it's Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, AJ Green you want to go to. I don't know which one's going to have the big game, if any of them do. Zach Ertz feels like he's kind of touchdown or bust. I know we saw Zach Ertz have that massive game against Seattle, but Zach Ertz hasn't shown enough this year, even when he's been on the Cardinals, when he was on the Eagles, to where he's someone that can really break a slate. Like, Zach Ertz is really unlikely to go out there and put up 25, 30 DK points. I know he did it Week 11 against Seattle, but most weeks he's going to probably get 4 or 5 targets, and you just got to hope that he catches a touchdown. He kind of feels like a boom-bust touchdown play. Boom-bust. He's got to catch a touchdown to get there. You could say that about AJ Green. You could say that about Christian Kirk as well. I think Christian Kirk and AJ Green give you a little bit more upside, though. I slightly prefer those guys over Ertz, but I don't really have a strong lean when it comes to these Cardinals receivers, just because they're all going to be on the field a decent amount. You just got to hope that you roster the one that probably catches a touchdown. I think my favorite would probably be Kirk if I had to choose, but no strong stance there. I think Tyler Higbee at 5K is a fine value. He's basically an every down tight end at this point. He's going to get 4, 5, 6 targets on a weekly basis. He's kind of touchdown or bust as well. Like Tyler Higbee, it's really unlikely for Tyler Higbee to have a big game unless he gets into the end zone. But at 5K, if you need some value, I think he's a fine option too. He would be right there in the mix with those other guys that we just talked about. I think all those guys are probably touchdown or bust, but Christian Kirk would probably be my favorite. Between the four, between Kirk, Ertz, Higbee, and AJ Green, I probably would go Kirk there. But again, no strong stance. Again, Chase Edmonds could return from IR, could be active Monday night. He's a game time decision. If he does play at 4,600, like, he is really cheap. Normally, Edmonds would not be this cheap on a showdown slate, but we don't really know what his role is going to be. I think James Conner has played so well that I think Conner has the upper hand on Chase Edmonds right now. Normally when both these guys are healthy, it would be a 50-50 split between Edmonds and Conner. I think it might be like a 60-40 split, maybe 65-35. So Edmonds at 4,600 is just kind of a riskier option. He's still playable because he has upside. He's a really talented running back, but we don't know if he's going to be on any sort of pitch count. We don't really have any information there yet. Just kind of a tournament play. Not a guy that I have a ton of confidence in, but viable because it's a showdown slate. The kickers I think are fine for value on this slate. The defenses I'm not as high on. I don't think the defense are going to make my player pool. If I was maybe playing just a handful of lineups, maybe throw the defense in one or two, but on this slate, I don't think the defenses really stand out to me. But then talk about like punt plays for value. So now that Chase Edmonds could be back, that's probably going to take Eno Benjamin out of play. Maybe if Chase Edmonds remains out, you could go to Eno Benjamin, but not a ton of confidence there. I think Rondale Moore at 2K is probably going to be the guy that gets the most ownership down here. He's definitely the most known name that's down here. 2K is very cheap for Rondale Moore. Obviously, with this Cardinals team, they spread the ball around so much. Rondale Moore at this point is like the wide receiver 4 for Arizona. He kind of showed some upside during the regular season, had a really big game in week 2, had a good game week 5 against San Fran. He's been really, inconsistent though. We've seen a lot of disappointing games from Rondale Moore. We've seen a very low floor from Rondale Moore. I think the ceiling is still there just because he is a pretty talented receiver. He's obviously playing with a really good quarterback and a really good offense. You expect them to put up points here. You expect this game to probably be a shootout. So at 2K, if you are looking for a punt, I think Rondale Moore does make a lot of sense. He's going to play on probably 40 to 45% of the snaps. He's not going to be like an every down receiver or anything. He's just going to mix in on 3 wide receiver sets and 4 wide receiver sets. But if he does get a deep ball thrown his way, and he connects, and him and Kyler connect on a deep ball, obviously that could be what wins you the slate. So I think at 2K, especially if I was playing a lot of lineups, I would for sure have Rondale Moore in my player pool. And if you're looking for value below the kickers, I think he's my favorite play that offers you at least a little bit of upside. I definitely like Rondale Moore at 2K. That's probably it, though. I don't see too much else I really like here. If we're looking for punt options, I think Rondale Moore is probably your best play. And after that, there's really nothing else that I think stands out. So that kind of does it for the player pool, guys. That really does it for all the playable options. Now, hitting on roster construction. So on this slate, there are a lot of ways you could go at captain. There's a lot of viable plays in the captain spot. You could definitely pay up for Cooper Kupp at captain. I normally don't play quarterbacks in the captain spot, but I think Kyler, especially with how much rushing upside he has, with how he can just, throw for 2 or 3 touchdowns, run for 1 or 2 touchdowns, he can put up a massive game without any of his receivers doing incredibly well, and we saw that happen last week. Those kind of quarterbacks I think are always captain viable, so you could obviously play Kyler in the captain spot. I think if Chase Edmonds is out again, James Conner's captain worthy. I think D-Hop and Van Jefferson as lower-owned captain plays, they have upside. I think they're viable. Sony Michel, I think, a really strong option. His ownership in the captain might be a little bit too high for my liking. I think in large field tournaments, I probably wouldn't be playing Sony Michel in captain just because I think he's going to project so well that a lot of people are just going to jam him in the captain spot. But he's a really strong play in general. Odell, you could go to as a lower-owned captain play. There's a lot of ways you could go in the captain spot. There's a lot of viable options on this slate. Obviously, Cooper Kupp, Kyler, Connor, if Edmonds is out, these are probably your best pay-up options. If we wanted to build a Kyler captain lineup, normally if I do play a quarterback at captain, I want to try and pair him with at least 2 of his receivers, because if we are assuming that quarterback has a really big game, that obviously means some of his receivers are probably going to do well. I don't think you have to pair the receivers with Kyler just because we know Kyler can do it through the ground. And again, we saw that happen last week. Kyler had over 30 Draftkings points and none of his receivers did that well. But if I was going to, pair Kyler with one of his receivers, D-Hop's obviously someone you could go to. You could take a shot on one of these guys down here, whether it be Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee, AJ Green, or not Tyler Higbee, excuse me, but Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, AJ Green, or we could take a shot on Rondale Moore. At 2K, I do kind of like Rondale Moore as a value, so let's plug him into this build, see what we can do, see if we can maybe, get some of these other top tier guys. So we plug Rondale Moore in. Maybe we try and play both quarterbacks. I think both quarterbacks are very safe, solid plays here. The ownership on quarterbacks is normally really, really high, but they always have a very high chance of the quarterbacks being in the winning lineup. Now, for the quarterback to be the winning captain, obviously they need to put up a really huge game. But if Matthew Stafford puts up 20 DK points, if Kyler puts up 25 DK points, it's really likely that both those guys are going to be in the winning lineup, and they probably project for right around those amount of fantasy points. So I do like both quarterbacks. If we play Stafford, that leaves us 69.33 left per player. I don't know if we could get Cooper Kupp into this build, which is something I kind of would like to do. If we do play Cooper Kupp, we're left with 4,400 left per player for our last 2 spots. So that leaves us enough to play one of the kickers. We could play Matt Gay and then AJ Green. AJ Green, a little bit of a riskier option. All these Cardinals guys like Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, AJ Green, Rondale Moore, they all carry a little bit of risk, but this lineup does kind of look decent. I mean, we got Kyler at captain with 2 of his pass catchers. Obviously, it's not the 2 pass catchers that you would prefer, but if you want to play Kyler at captain with D-Hop and one of those other guys, you're going to spend a lot of salary there. So going a little bit cheaper with AJ Green, Rondale Moore, that allows us to get Matthew Stafford. That allows us to get Cooper Kupp, and then we got the kicker in there. And I think kickers are always good to give you 7, 8, 9, 10 points. Kickers rarely are going to put up a score that you have to have in tournaments to win, but we do see kickers sometimes be in the winning lineup. Especially sometimes on higher scoring slates when the kickers get a lot of extra points, get a lot of field goal attempts, they can actually put up decent games. Now, in this type of game that does have a high total, it's a pretty good possibility that one of these receivers down here puts up a really big game and that, they obviously are going to outscore the kicker, but it's just going to be really tough to predict which one of those guys it's going to be, given all the guys that we talked about down here. So plugging in the kicker, I think, is fine in this build. But that's kind of a build that I like. Kyler captain. Obviously, there's a lot of other guys you could play at captain. Cooper Kupp, Connor, if Edmonds is out, D-Hop, Van Jefferson. Sony Michel in captain, I think, makes a lot of sense. I think his ownership in captain will be pretty high. But, projection-wise, I think that's going to project really well. If you wanted to build like a Sony Michel captain lineup, that's going to allow you some salary to definitely pay up for maybe both quarterbacks, maybe Cooper Kupp as well. Probably going to have to go cheap with Rondo Moore at like 2K. That would leave you enough to play like one of the defenses, which is fine. But we can maybe take out Cooper Kupp, maybe go down to like D-Hop, and then that leaves us enough to get up to, well, damn, we wouldn't have enough to get up to Odell, because I would kind of like to get up to Odell, but we could play Christian Kirk there. So like that's another build you could do that I kind of like, a Sony Michel captain lineup. But yeah, guys, should be a pretty fun Showdown slate. Again, I say this almost every video. I don't play very heavy on Showdown. Showdown's not my preferred game format. I think there's a lot of variance in Showdown. I like to play over on Prize Picks. I like to get most of my money in for these primetime games over on Prize Picks. So if you guys do want to check out Prize Picks, you want to make some picks for tonight's game, you can take a look at their board, see what they have to offer. You go over or under a player's projection. As you can see, they have fantasy point projections. They have player props, so passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, receptions. You have to make at least 2 picks. You can make up to 5 picks, and you can win up to 10 extra money on Prize Picks. So if you guys do want to sign up over there, use code Noah. They will match your first deposit. They will give you a free bet up to $100 when you do sign up with my code. But that's it, guys. Best of luck on this Showdown slate. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Hope you did enjoy it, and we will see you in the next one.